So next, we're going to move on to standard 2, where we're going to identify the phrases. Okay, there are two different things I want you to do here to identify the phrase. One, use, put this on our camera, use a phrase mark to indicate the phrases. A reminder, phrases must end with a cadence. Remember that phrases, okay, are a way for us to organize different measures of music, usually 4 or 8 bar units, although there can be some variation there, but definitely, you know, around 4 at least, for 4 bars for to constitute a phrase. To think about organizing these as units that end with a cadence. Okay, so remember, we're not analyzing every instance of 5 to 1 or 4 to 1 as a cadence. Let's say a song goes from 1 to 4 to 1 to 4 to 1 to 4. We're not saying that there's a plagal cadence every second bar or every bar. We're talking only about cadence as an end point, or sort of a punctuation at the end of a group of bars. Okay, so this in this example, okay, we can see that there are 8 bars. Okay, so there's a pretty good chance that we can divide this into 2 different phrases. Remember, for our purposes, we're only analyzing something as a phrase if it ends with a kind of a cadence, a cadence of some type. And you can review all the cadence types in chapter 9 that we've gone over. In this case, the first 4 bars, okay, we only have 1 as the harmony and end with 5. Okay, so in this case, this is a half cadence because we have a chord, okay, going through the 4 bars, and as a part of the 4 bars, it ends with a 5, a dominant harmony. Okay, so in this case, this ends with a half cadence. Okay, and I'm going to use a phrase mark, which is a sort of a long slur, to indicate these 4 bars are part of one phrase that ends with a half cadence. Remember that cadences only happen at the end of a phrase as we're using the term. Okay, even if you, I mean, it's not seen here, but let's say you have chord changes 1 5 1 5 1 5 in a piece or in your composition. We're not going to call every bar a half cadence or a perfect authentic cadence, for example. We're only using this idea of a cadence as the end of a phrase. Okay. The last 4 bars, okay, we have a 1 to 5 to 1. Okay, so that's another clear example of a phrase, of a 4-bar phrase that ends. Okay, so here I'm going to add another phrase mark, right, that ends with an authentic cadence. Okay, what kind of authentic cadence? Well, it's a perfect authentic cadence because it satisfies those two criteria for having a perfect authentic cadence. It goes from 5 to 1 using root position triads. So you have G chord here in root position with the G in the bass, and the C chord implied again with the C in the bass. And the melody or the soprano line ends with the tonic. In this case, re, do, re, do. Okay, so both of those things are satisfied. So this is not only an authentic cadence, it is a perfect authentic cadence. Okay, so the 2 phrases here, 4 bars, ends in half cadence. The second 4 bars ends in a perfect authentic cadence. Okay, and as part of what I just demonstrated, I also moved on to the second bullet for standard 2, which is for a given cadence, indicate the type of cadence above the staff by using the appropriate abbreviation. So here, HC and PAC. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. Again, you're not going to write HC, HC, HC every bar, for example, because again, we're looking at a cadence point that is at the end of a phrase. Okay, so we're thinking about phrases as the unit that ends with a cadence. Okay, if there's no cadence, then there's no phrase. Okay, this is also related to the second task I wanted you to do, which is to create a phrase chart. Okay, which is a sort of a abbreviated version of what we have analyzed so far in this piece. Okay. I'd like you to include motivic identification to tell me whether the 2 phrases share similar motivic material. Also include measures, numbers, and cadences, and identify the type of period, if applicable, as asymmetric, symmetric, parallel, or contrasting. Okay, so these 2 parameters. First, I'm just going to rewrite the phrase chart here with 2 phrase marks because we've identified 2 phrases. Next, I'm going to write out the measure numbers. So the first phrase is 4 bars, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's measures 1 through 4. The second phrase in this piece is also four measures long, from 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So this is going to be measures 5 through 8. The first phrase ends with a half cadence, so I'm going to write half cadence there. The second phrase ends with a perfect authentic cadence, so I'm going to write a perfect authentic cadence here. So you very clearly see the layout of these 2 phrases. Finally, let's talk about motivic identification for a little bit. So if you take a look at the 2 phrases and take a look at the melodic similarities or differences, you can see that really there's a lot of similarity between the melody in the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. In fact, the first 2 bars and some of the third bar is identical when they repeat in measures 5, 6, and 7. It isn't until this neighbor tone, these 2 neighbor tones, okay, one goes down to a B, I'm sorry, it wasn't until the C right here. That is, and then also the grace note. Okay, again, the second half of the third bar. That's when it changes. But for 1 measure, 2 measure, another half measure of the of the third bar, that's exactly the same between the two phrases. So that's a good case to say that these 2 phrases share musical motive. Right. So to indicate that, I'm going to call the first phrase A, because A in this case represent this kind of musical motive, ba, sol, 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 do, sol, mi, right? Which repeats sol, 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 do, sol, mi in the second phrase. So I'm going to call that A prime. Finally, I'm going to ask you this question: is this a period? Yes, this is a period, right? Because it has 2 phrases and is structured as in an antecedent and consequent relationship, right? You have a first phrase that ends with a weak cadence, and the second phrase that ends with a perfect authentic cadence. Right. So in this case, the first phrase is something that's not PAC. Right. So inherently weaker type of cadence as PAC, because remember, we identified the PAC as the strongest possible cadence to establish tonality, to establish a key that you can have in Western music. And that, of course, includes both classical and popular repertoire. The strongest way you can infer the tonality of a key, to establish a key, to have something sound like G major, C major, F major, is to have a perfect authentic cadence. So we have a phrase that ends in something else other than PAC, and then we answer that with another phrase that ends with a PAC. So this is an antecedent and consequent relationship. So that constitutes a period, a musical period. Okay, so again, the period describes 2 phrases that share that relationship. Please review this in the section that talks about periods in the textbook. Finally, if this is a period, what type of period is this? It is a symmetric or symmetrical period, and because it has the same number of bars in both the antecedent and the consequent phrase, and then also this is a parallel period because it shares motivic material. Okay, so not only does it use a same number of bars in each of the 2 parts, it also uses the same melodic material, seen by here calling it A and A prime. Right? And that is just, again, the analysis from the similarity between the 2 halves, the melody and the 2 halves of the piece.